Welcome to Beardy, Bruce Lee Central.
Hey everybody, it's Birdie here. What's going on, guys? Okay, so we know that Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris had tons of sparring matches. They did something called attacking techniques, where one would defend and one would attack, and then they switch it up and one would attack and one would defend.
Bag, sparring, we'd spar what we call attacking techniques, where I'd attack him and he'd defend, then he would attack me and I would defend. And this went on for 3 years until he left for Hong Kong to pursue his movie career, which I've already told you about.
And they did this for years and years and years, and everything was good, right? But one day, Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris ended up having a real fight. Now, we don't know the details of this fight. What we know is that Chuck Norris told everyone that he was going to have a sparring match with Bruce Lee and they would do some training, and after that he would come to his karate dojo and train the class. So Chuck Norris showed up to this class with a dislocated shoulder and bruises on his face. So everyone was asking Chuck what the heck happened, and Chuck refused to talk about it. He refused everyone. He didn't want to talk about it. Until this day, Chuck Norris does not want to talk about that incident. Now, we can only speculate what happened, but everyone knew that Bruce Lee and him had a real fight. At the time, there was a rumor going around that for 3 weeks, Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee did not talk to each other. If that's true or not, I don't know. What we do know is that Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris obviously became friends even after this. And they did Way of the Dragon together, of course. So, but yeah, that's all the information we have. We can only speculate as to what happened during the match. But what we do know is that right after Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris supposedly were going to have a sparring match, suddenly Chuck Norris shows up with a dislocated shoulder and bruises on his face. So, I mean, it's obvious they had a real fight. And the reason they didn't talk to each other for 3 weeks is because Chuck Norris had his ego trashed, His ego was shattered, his ego was broken. Remember, Chuck Norris was the world karate champion at this time. And for him to lose to someone that's not the world karate champion was, for him, ego shattering, Remember that Bruce Lee was opposed to karate. He didn't like belts, he didn't like trophies, he didn't like any of the stuff. He didn't like any of the medals, the accolades, all of that stuff. Bruce Lee was anti all of that. And that's what Chuck Norris was all about. He was all about the belts, the points, the medals, the trophies, the accolades, all of that stuff. So Chuck Norris's ego must have been totally shattered when he lost to Bruce Lee. Not only losing to Bruce Lee, but I'm just gonna stick my neck out and say that Bruce Lee completely obliterated him. I mean, if the match was even and let's say it was like almost a draw, then I bet you Chuck Norris would talk about that fight to this day. But the fact that Chuck Norris does not want to talk about it to this day, I mean, it's been 50 years later, and Chuck Norris still does not want to talk about it. If you ask Chuck Norris, he would say that, no, we only did sparring matches, we never had a real fight. And that just makes no sense at all. That someone like Chuck Norris, someone with Chuck Norris's ego, would not fight Bruce Lee in a real fight does not make sense. I'm 100% sure that was a real fight, the first and only real fight that they had, and that Chuck Norris basically realized that Bruce Lee is on a whole other level. And I mean, they did the fight. I mean, obviously Bruce Lee pitched the fight to Chuck Norris, in the Way of the Dragon, and he said that you're gonna lose to my character, and Chuck Norris accepted it without even arguing. And basically, so if Chuck Norris accepted without even arguing the case, that means that Chuck Norris basically had accepted that Bruce Lee was superior to him anyway, so it didn't really matter. So there you go, guys. There's no way of 100% proving this because no one saw it. It was just Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris in Bruce Lee's backyard. So there's no one that actually recorded this or saw this. It's basically speculation, but I'm pretty sure that it actually happened. You know, suddenly Chuck Norris shows up at his dojo with a dislocated shoulder and bruises on his face right after he supposedly had a sparring match with Bruce Lee. So I'm pretty sure it actually happened.
In fact, I was fighting for the world title, and that's when Bruce was doing the Green Hornet series, and he came back there as a celebrity guest. And after I won the title, the promoter introduced me to Bruce, and so we started talking about our philosophies in the martial arts and so forth. And anyway, we were both staying at the same hotel, the Americana in New York, and we started walking over to the hotel. As we got going up the elevator, I remember Bruce was staying on the 7th floor, and I was on the 9th. As we got to his floor, we were really getting pretty involved into our conversation. So instead of me going up, I stepped out in the hallway with him, and this like 11:30 at night. And we started working out in the hallway. And next time I looked at my watch, it was 7 o'clock the next morning. And it was amazing because the guy he had so much knowledge and, as you know on the screen, ability, that it seemed like an hour had gone by as far as us working out and exchanging ideas. So he said, well, when we get back to Los Angeles, why don't we start working out together? Which we did when I got back. We started training together, and then the series was canceled, and he went to Hong Kong to pursue a movie career. When he went to Hong Kong, his first movie, the biggest grossing movie in Asia, before Bruce went over there, was The Sound of Music. It had grossed $2.4 million, which again was the biggest movie ever grossed in the Orient. Bruce did the first movie called The Big Boss, which over here was The Fist of Fury, and that one grossed $3.2 million, which is $800,000 more than The Sound of Music. Then he did The Fist of Fury, which over here was called The Chinese Connection, and that one grossed $4.3 million. And then he called me up and he said he'd like to do a movie with a real good fight scene in the movie. I said, well, the only way we can have a fight scene is if I get to hit you once in a while. And he said, well, yeah, naturally, we'd make it a back and forth type fight. So anyway, that fight scene that you saw took us 5 days to do, and in Asia alone, the movie grossed over $11 million. It's the biggest grossing movie in the history of Asia, and they don't think anything will surpass it for a long time. Then Bruce naturally did Enter the Dragon, which was his last movie, and it was probably the biggest grossing movie as far as martial art movies go. But Bruce was 32 years old. Let me explain something about his death too, because there's, I guess, so many rumors that are going about how he passed away and so forth, about touch of death and drugs and so forth. And so I'd like to clarify that before we go on with the demonstration. Is Bruce in 1968? Well, he's pretty heavy in the weightlifting, as you could tell. He was very well built, and he was lifting weights one night with Kareem Jabbar, who was a student of his when he was in Los Angeles, playing at UCLA. And he tried to lift too heavy weights, and he ruptured the disc in his back, and he was laid up in the hospital for 3 weeks. In fact, the doctor said that they didn't know if he'd be able to walk again or not. But of course, with a person like Bruce, who's got the drive and determination to achieve anything in life, he was up in about a month, and within 3 months, he was as strong as he ever was. But he had constant back pains from that day on, and he was having to take medication to keep the muscles in the back loose and relaxed. So what happened is that when he was in Hong Kong preparing for his next movie, he was working with a girl named Betty, and who was going to co-star with him, and he got a severe headache. So Betty gave him some antibiotics for the headache, and with the medication he had taken for his back and the medication he had taken for his headache, they reacted to each other and made his brain swell up, and it created an aneurysm or ruptured blood cells in his brain, and that's actually what happened. So if anyone asks you what happened, you can tell them the true story.